Okay, now let's suppose that we want to create the object with our own defined indices. Okay, so same code. So now after giving the list, then you add index is equal to, okay, and then you give a list of what needs to be used as index. Okay, so like let's say A, B, C, and D. Then see, instead of automatically assigning indexes of 0 through 3, so now you have index A, B, C, D. Okay. Now if you do OBJ index, so it tells you what the indexes are, and then tells you what the index type is. Index is object meaning it's a string basically. Okay. And it can be, an index can be lots of different things. Okay, here the simplest is of course integers and string values. Okay, so the values is the same as before. Okay. So if you already have a series and you want to change the index, so for example here OBJ, the index is A, B, C, D, right? If you want to set indexes at the time of creation, you do it like this. Okay, you create with pd.series and then provide index as one of the arguments. But if an object already, if a series already exists and you want to change the index, then you do obj.index, right? So which is what we use to display what the indexes are. But if you set it equal to a new list, right? Suppose we say W X Y Z, and then display OBJ. Now this changes the existing index to the new set. Okay. So now let's say, how do you change data types? Okay, so OBJ right now is integer, right? OBJ index is object, but the values of the series, they are integers, 4, 7, -5, and 3. Now we can change this using as type. So suppose if you say object2 is OBJ, okay, and then we can use as type function, and then you can say like float. If you want to use the numpy, sorry, numpy float 64, so for example. Okay. When we use NP, we should not put quotation marks around it. That's the, okay. So now the values have been converted from integer to floating point. Okay. Now we can do obj3 is you take obj and do an as type. Suppose we want to convert these into string objects. Okay. Okay, you can use str for that. And then obj3 is, now you see data type is object. So here data type was floating point 64. So now they appear exactly like here, but the type, data type is object. Okay. Now if you have data, if the data type is object and if they are all numbers, okay, if they are all numbers, then we can convert it back to as type, say NP int 32. Okay, so that will convert these strings back to integer. Of course, that will happen only if the strings are all numeric values coded as strings. So if you have a non-numeric value, then this won't work. Like for example, if instead of 4, 7, minus 5 and 3, if you have 4, 7, A and 3 as strings, okay, they are all strings, 4 as string, 7 as string, A as string, and 3 as string. Now the as type converting back to integer or back to floating point will throw an error. Now indexing elements, okay, let's look at OBJ. So if you do OBJ 1, okay, you can index values by the position. So OBJ 0 would be 4, OBJ 1 is 7. So if you say OBJ 3 will be 3, and so on, right? And you can also index using the index values, right? So if you say OBJ, I want Y. Okay, so that will give you the value where index is equal to the letter Y. Now you can also use fancy indexing like what we discussed last time in NumPy. So we can do OBJ. Okay. Now the multiple indexes that you want to specify must be a separate list. So it's a list inside the index value. So now the first item, index number 1, and then index number 0, and then index number 3 are printed. Okay. And you can also do like in NumPy. So you can use, or a list also. You can use a colon to say, okay, so I want the whole range, starting from the left value as the index, all the way to the right value except not inclusive of the right value. So 5 means, 3 means you stop one short of 3. Okay. So you can do this in using the index also. Like, the indexes are W, X, Y, Z, right? So if I say X through Z, okay, so this will work. Now here, okay, both sides are inclusive because we are using the index values. So it will go all the way starting from X all the way through Z, Z included. And like before, we can also do a list. Fancy indexing type. Okay, so within the square brackets, you need to provide the multiple indices as a list. And we can use assignment statements to assign values. So if you say obj x is equal to 100, now that will assign the value 100 into the series where the index is x.